We are back to reading The Rape of the Mind, The Psychology of Thought Control, Menticide, and Brainwashing by Just A. Merleau, M.D. We are now in Chapter 13, Intrusion by the Administrative Mind. Since social life has become more and more complicated, a new group of mediators between man and his goals has developed. It is no longer the ancient priest who mediates between man and his gods, between man and the powers beyond him, but a group of administrators have in part taken over the job of intervening between man and his government. There are today mediators between man and his bosses, between artist and public, between farmer and market, mediators between everything. The administrative mind is born, often dominating man's social behavior and man's manifold contacts, leading him into complicated actions and compulsions far beyond spontaneous behavior. All these ties, the rigid bureaucratic ones and the useful administrative ones, have their influence on human behavior and often may befog man's free thinking. I have a special reason for developing this theme in a book on the rape of the mind because this problem of mediation between man and his actions and thoughts exists in our form of democracy as well as in the totalitarian countries. Both halves of the world are grappling with the involved problem of how to administer themselves. The mere technique of governing ourselves and our world can become a threat to free human development, and this may be independent of the ideology the administration adheres to. We have not the same freedom to choose the official men who govern us that we have to select our favorite shop or our doctor. As long as the official man is in charge, we are in his bureaucratic power. The administrative mind. Administrators today cannot handle their jobs adequately within the limits of the simple knowledge of people and nations that served governments in former years. If our leaders cannot take into account the irrational forces in themselves and in other men and nations, they may easily be swept off into the maelstrom of mass emotions. If they cannot learn to recognize that their private or official conduct often reflects their prejudices and irrationalities, they will not be able to cope with the often unexpected prejudices of others. If they are, for instance, not sensitive to the paradoxical strategy hidden behind the misleading Aesop language of totalitarians, they will not be able to counter the Cold War. Psychological knowledge has become a must in our era of confused human relations. Do our people in office, for instance, understand fully the provocative totalitarian strategy of slandering and wild accusation, and are they able to handle it adequately? Do they realize that the mere official denial never has as strong an appeal and impact as the initial accusation, and in fact usually fits into the accuser's strategy? Apparently they do not. For many still use simple official denial as a defense against the totalitarian strategy of accusation, when in fact only repeated exposure and ridicule of the very root of this technique can defeat it. Do they realize the implications of the strategy of raising sham problems? The totalitarian and the demagogue often use this confusing technique by launching emotional inquiries and investigations and asking for attention for quasi-problems. They seek to divert attention from their real aims. Do they understand, for instance, what lies behind the technique of exploiting the chivalry and generosity of the public and blackmailing the pity of the world? The strategy of complaining and calling for justice is a well-known mental defense used by neurotic individuals to arouse guilt feelings in others and to cover up their own hidden aggressiveness. The exploitation of pity and the overt declaration of one's own purity and honest innocence is a familiar trick when it is used by individuals, but we are less likely to recognize it when it is used in international politics. Do our administrators realize that even the romantic ideals of brotherly love and world peace can be used to cover up aggressive designs? After the First World War, we heard many inspiring idealistic catchwords from the defeated Central European countries. Their press and their leaders described in great detail for all the world to know the inner purification through suffering of the defeated peoples. Thus, these countries appealed to the conscience and compassion of the whole world, but it was a questionable conversion. Every therapist knows that those who talk a great deal about their inner change and recovery have, for the most part, not changed at all. The fine phrases are so often contradicted by actions. politicians must recognize that this can be as true for nations as it is for individuals. Let us not forget that nations don't talk. Official words are made up by representatives with unofficial and mostly unknown inner motives or motivations. Administrators, diplomats, and politicians form the nerve centers and paths of communication between peoples and nations. The tensions in the diplomatic regions represent the political tensions in the world, but they represent other things too. The political profession is subject to special kinds of nervous tensions. The moment the administrator arrives at a top level, an inner change may take place. From then on, he can identify with those who formerly led him. The very fact of being in office and being a leader may change a man's mind in many ways. He often removes himself more and more from human problems and from the people he represents and thinks only in terms of national strategy, official ideology, and the aims of power politics. Or childhood ambitions, long frustrated, are aroused. He may become the victim of his inflated personal ambitions and his individual notion of responsibility, and as a consequence lose control of his own personality. Leading statesmen burdened by the responsibilities have to become more careful. Indeed, they often have to express themselves in non-committal language, yet they are not aware that such language gradually may reform their way of thinking. Finally, they may think they possess a priority on double talk. Another difficulty is related to a rather general fear of success. Once a high ambition is reached, a long-hidden fear from childhood may awake, a fear related to an early competition with the father and with the siblings. From this time on, the envy and hostility of those bypassed may start to injure the statesman's life. The danger of assuming any leadership, even of any form of self-assertion, is that it provokes resistance and hostility, retaliation and punishment. The administrator knows himself to be in the public eye. He feels exposed to criticism and political attack. If he didn't have it before, from now on he has to develop a defensive facade in order to court the public and the voters. The result may be that the former meek Democrat, the believer in government by the people, suddenly takes on the stature of an authoritarian personality. He is guided by his frustrated infantile fantasy of leadership. The administrative brain trusters, with all their inner problems, nevertheless make history for us. Our minds are deeply affected by their minds. At the same time, we, the great public, influence them, and our civilized impulses may direct them to find the good road, just as our primitive drives and influences may urge them on to push us all into catastrophe. The intrusion of the administrative mind becomes even more precarious when the authorities in power follow patterns of procedure not controlled by court and the law. In such cases, prejudice and arbitrariness can easily develop, as we have experienced with many of our security regulations. Official secrecy is a token of magic power. The more hush-hush there is in the world, the less democratic control and the greater fear of treachery. It should be technically quite simple to administer any group or nation, or even the whole world. Mankind certainly knows enough to do this job. We know a great deal about history, sociology, and the science of human relations and government, at least enough not to repeat the mistakes from history. We live in a world of technical and economic abundance, but we have not yet learned to apply what we know or to organize the resources of the world. Somewhere something has gone wrong and things have gotten out of hand. The will of nations and people to understand one another seems to be paralyzed. The mutual fear and suspicion have been built up by the fantasies of mythical ideologies warring against one another, and tomorrow only the tales of the fighting dogs may remain. During the Second World War, I was sent as an official representative of the Netherlands government to an international meeting on welfare and war relief. Here I became even more aware of the extent to which private passions can mold the way we handle public problems. All of us at the conference had cold, expressionless faces which implied a sharp, unbiased form of thinking, but our unconscious minds were touched by other problems. Welfare is often much more a subject of hate than of love and sympathy. One's pride and prestige can play a much greater role than pity for the poor victim. The displaced persons and the people of the devastated and underdeveloped countries are very much aware of this fact. They do not like the role in which fate has cast them. They have to play the double role of this eternal victim, who is not only the victim of politics and war, but also of the often arrogant provider of charity. As a matter of fact, the representative at the receiving end of the deal resented any offer made to his country. Everybody wants to be himself the generous uncle from America. And we're going to pick this up in the next video. We're running out of time here, so I'll see you. Hang out. We're in chapter 13.